All right, guys, we're jumping in with the first mailbag here. I've got the questions assembled. And as always, we're going to push the narrative. We're going to push the tactica. And then I'm going to turn it over in the comments for feedback, suggestions, questions for next week's mailbag. And we're going to keep this going weekly to try and get that hobby on and try to explore some different ideas in terms of wargaming, board gaming, Dungeons and Dragons, everything. Everything is open for possibilities. So jumping right in, Fritz, what's your favorite miniature in your collection? And I would ask the same thing of you guys. What is that favorite miniature? Now, across the entire spectrum of war games that I play, if I look at war games that I've played for a while, let's preface it with that. God Tier is a war game, fantastic, but it's too new. I'm only about 6 or so months in. But if we look at Warhammer 40,000, if we look at Battletech, I have a lot of fond memories with these models and these systems. If we look at X-Wing miniatures, also a number of great years playing these games. So it's really, really hard to narrow it down to one favorite model. But in each army or each group that I play, each system, there are one or two models that really stick out. These are the models that when I pull them out of the gaming case, like I can feel the narrative. I can feel the memories. Literally, I can see in my mind. It's like a visual symbol, Emperor Protects, of past victories, past defeats, literal hours on the gaming table, building a real-time narrative of these models. So it's a living history, and it's a history that continues to evolve, even with some of these models and some of these armies that potentially I haven't played in a long time, or I cycle around. So within that narrative, here's a couple of examples. In my Black Templar army, I have a Chapter Master in Terminator armor. And naturally, he leads in the Terminators. I mean, this is the glory that we're going for. And I have played this model in numerous small games. I've played it in bigger games, back in the day, apocalypse narrative games. And being in the Terminator armor and being the Chapter Master, he takes on the most risky missions. I see them literally on the battle barge, invoking the tech priests with the sacred oils and sacred incense and literally teleporting into battle. So I've done some pretty risky stuff over the years in terms of insertion, either teleporting or with a Land Raider or, delivering by Thunderhawk if we're playing Apocalypse. Stuff that my opponent looks at me like, Fritz, you're absolutely crazy. I mean, there was a big game we were playing. We were playing an Apocalypse game. And there was one objective sitting on top of a tower. It was like this tower. Everything's WYSIWYG, footprint WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And there was an objective on top of this tower. There was no way we were going to really get to this tower. Because imagine on the battlefield, there's a tower. There was some units up there, some long range, maybe Chaos Space Marines or something. And the rest of the area, the footprint of the table was literally, I won't say thousands of models, but easily hundreds and hundreds of models and dozens of tanks, because we were playing Chaos versus Imperium, 5 or 6 players on each side. This is WYSIWYG. That's what we're playing. And we weren't playing with the rules where you could necessarily destroy buildings from that perspective. It wasn't destructible terrain. So we fire something off. I think it was a Shadow Sword or something, hit it with a D weapon and blew off the unit on top of that tower. I saw that opportunity. So we give the order, prepare to teleport in. I teleport my Chapter Master with 4 other Terminators, Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, bodyguard unit, literally right onto that tower. The footprint just fit. Back in the day when you had to build the base, the ring just fit, just made it. And to be fair, I placed to the Terminator captain and the other side. I was like, look, you guys place the miniatures. They fit. They barely fit without overlapping onto any other points on the table, overlapping onto, since we weren't playing with elevation, overlapping onto other units. I'm like, they fit. So they're looking, they fit. I deep strike in. Now, this was back in the day with the scattered dice, and there was a 33% chance, or is it 66, because there's 2 hits, of arriving spot on. Otherwise, there's a deviation. And if I deviated the 2d6, that's it. I'm going to roll on the mishap. I'm going to go in the warp. It's not going to work. I'm going to get destroyed. I land straight on. And now, since it's WYSIWYG, the tower, the top of the tower, had these ramparts that were jutting up. You couldn't draw a line of sight. So now for the next 2 turns, they're sending in waves and waves of just whatever to try and dislodge me on this objective. And it was like, how many turns can I last? So every time I see that model, just those memories come back. In my Samhan Warhost, I have a Farseer on a jet bike. And I played that model back in 2007 at the Grand Tournament. This was when Games Workshop back in the day just released Apocalypse. They just released it. They were hosting a big game down in Baltimore. We were there for the Grand Tournament, and it was literally throwing your models down and playing. And I got to play in that narrative game with my friends from the gaming club and other people in the Warhammer community. I pull out that model. I have those memories of it where I can see that coming back. Battletech also. I love lots and lots of mechs in Battletech, but I have one awesome, as in awesome mech, as in literally an awesome mech, the assault mech. I pull that mech out of my case. I want to say 1 out of every 5 games I play this mech because I love the awesome, I love the mech, and it's always performed. Right now, first vision that comes to mind, a battle maybe a year or 2 ago, it was a while ago, playing against the clans and taking on 2 or 3 clanners at one time, just getting pounded. I mean, they were cutting through me like it was a light mech. I'm taking hits, arm blown off, armor getting stripped off, and the awesome's got a ton of armor, but I'm like, I have to hold to the last. And I held those clanners at bay for a while with that mech. Now, if it was a campaign /RPG, the mech would have been scrapped. What it would have cost to rebuild would take generations for my mech warrior, or maybe I'd be rewarded out of loyalty for sticking to the end. But these are examples of favorite miniatures in my collection. There is a stable of miniatures that have a gaming history behind them, and that's what I try to push, and that's what I try to cultivate with all of my armies, with all of my miniatures. But these are the ones that rise to the top. So now it's only fair in the comments, 1 or 2 miniatures that you have in your collection that occupy that special place, that special thought. All right, we're jumping in to Battletech, right? We were talking about awesome. We're talking about miniatures. Let's take a look at this idea of Lostech in Battletech and how do we incorporate that into our games? So in the Battletech narrative, depending on the era, if we're looking at Succession era, pre-clan, the idea that these mechs are very, very advanced, the technology is very, very advanced, but there's a segment of it where we don't really understand what's going on, or it's very, very hard to replicate, meaning you have automated facilities assembling these mechs, and there's machines and parts doing it that if they break down, there's no more mechs. Or over time, you had mechs that were very, very advanced that have been stripped down and replaced with other things simply because the tech didn't exist. An example would be the Cyclops. Cyclops is an assault mech. It's not a bad assault mech tactically, but in the narrative, it's a command mech. It has a very, very powerful and potent command computer, and the idea is that the mech commander can literally be in that mech on the battlefield, issuing orders and doing things. In the narrative, if that Cyclops got its head blown off, that computer is gone and done, but the mech can be repaired. So you have Cyclopses in the game that don't necessarily have that battle computer. It's still a formidable assault mech, but it's lost tech. It has to be replaced. Another example would be the Mobile HQ. They have holographic projectors. They have communications arrays. They have, think of an RV that's a command center. And these would never be targeted on the tabletop. These would never be attacked, even if a position was overrun. They'd give you a chance to surrender. They would capture the Mobile HQ, and that would be an amazing war prize, but it's lost tech. So we see in Battletech, in the narrative, where there's lost tech that is scattered about through the inner sphere. An old factory, a crashed drop ship, some sort of data core that can be recovered. And these aspects in the game really represent the holy grail for the various houses, mech warrior factions, mercenary companies to capture them and to utilize them. So how this comes into the game is you see some mechs that have these systems built in that represent the pinnacle of technology, and they have kind of some unique stuff. The first example that comes to mind is the anti-missile system. And we see this on various mechs where essentially it's a very, very complex targeting and tracking system that can shoot down incoming long-range missiles. And with this system, the way it works, literally tactical on the game, is when a long-range missile pack shoots at you, you get to roll to reduce the clusters. We also see complicated sensor arrays that let you figure out where your opponent is. We see stealth armor, which gives you adjustments or covers or hides your mech from a distance. So these elements exist within certain mechs that you can play. Or in theory, if you were getting a little bit creative, you could build a mech with Lostech. So what are my thoughts on it tactically? I don't always play Lostech mechs. I don't have a problem with my opponent ever playing them, as long as we're playing a battle value type game. Most of our Battletech games are, okay, let's pick a battle value type. 4K, 5K, 6K. And then we just have a kind of a underwritten agreement of, well, what units do we want to include? Mechs? Do you want combined arms? Do you want air support? Then you buy your stuff during the week and you agonize over it. I spend like all week crafting lists, pulling mechs out, looking at stuff, only to change it at the last second. But then we have the reveal. So we sit down at the table to play, set it up, pick a map, pick a mission. You pull out one mech, I pull out one mech. And you're like, well, look, I know Fritz bringing 5 mechs. I can name 3 of them because they're going to be his 3 favorite mechs that they're going to be in rotation. But then we pull out some other stuff. So from that perspective, you want to pull out some Lostech that's going to do some really crazy and powerful stuff. I'll fight it. Let's do it. Let's make it happen because you paid the battle value. And what I find tactically on the table is, yes, you have some advantages. Yes, it's going to make things a little bit more challenging, but they can be defeated if they are on the same level. The balance is still there because, again, it's battle value. Where I find instances in Battletech of advantages not being countered that might lead to frustration, if we agree to 6K battle value and we leave it open to anything, you could bring tons of air units. And now I have to make a decision. Well, is Fritz going to play air units? Should I bring my own? If I don't, am I willing to gamble that? Because it makes me very vulnerable. Or if I'm not going to take air units, air support, then let me take some anti-air mechs or some partisan tanks or something. If you play a game where your opponent doesn't necessarily have access to a counter or to air units in this example, you're just going to ground pound them. And I've played some games just out of curiosity, no dedicated anti-air on the table, all mechs versus heavier air. The mechs just get obliterated. You get strafing runs, you get bombing runs, you're out of range for a lot. They're so fast, there's a lot of modifiers. So from that perspective, there are times when Battletech can be very slanted, but that's true with any type of war game. But I say, sure, incorporate the Lostech because it's possible it's out there. You can invent a narrative for it. And there's a lot of crazy things that happen on various worlds. Who the heck really knows? Forging a narrative, right? We're kind of at the flow here of today's mailbag. This idea, okay, Lostech has a very, very theme. How do we forge the narrative? My way of playing, so we're going to jump out to independent of any wargaming system. You and I, we're taking time out of real life. Life, family, school, responsibilities, work, and that time that we're setting aside for wargaming, I want it to be a premium experience for both of us. I want it to be something that we can look back and laugh about rolling dice and think about some really, really cool missions. You can think about those miniatures that are developing a literal living history with you. I mean, that's the goal. That's the idea. So from that perspective, I am very, very open to playing anything. Like, what type of mission do you want to play? If you have a preference, let's do it. Is there a type of game you want to play? You want to just go head to head? Let's do that. Let's see what we can do. So I'm open to put that to my, opponent, my gaming friend or the gaming group. What do you feel like today? Which is often why if I'm showing up to play a pickup game, pickup games are where you might go to a club or a store because you know it's 40K night. You don't know who you're going to play. You don't know what you're going to play. I'll often bring 2 armies with me. And whatever the standard is to play, I bring beyond that. So this way I can lend out something if there's someone there that wants to try. Or if there's an opportunity for someone to face something that they're feeling. An example would be I often bring Tyranids and I'll often bring my Space Marines. So I come up and you're like, okay, I've got whatever you have army. And I'll say, look, do you have a preference? I've got Tyranids and I've got Space Marines. I've got lists for both. Like, what do you feel like fighting? What do you feel like throwing your army up against? Do you have a preference? I might be feeling like playing Tyranids today, but if my opponent's like, hey, I'm really feeling Space Marines, let's do that. So I'm open to any narrative. This then leads into, I think it depends on what system and what the expectations are. There is this idea, and I think it comes from digital gaming, where things need to be somewhat fair and somewhat balanced. And I understand that because nothing is more frustrating than showing up for a game and, again, taking time out of real life and just getting obliterated because you feel like any choice you make, nothing's going to happen. Feeling like any choice I make tactically, I'm just going to lose. I had an Eldar foot list that I was working on, and I brought it to the club, and I was playing an opponent that they had a whack, win at all cost, super competitive tournament list. And I knew that. And they're pulling this out like it's nothing. And I say to them, hey, I don't want you to change your list if that's what you want to play, but this is going to be a short game because my list, I'm still developing it. It's very themed. I don't even know if it's going to work. I'm aware of what you're pulling out, even though you're trying to smoke me and just say no, this is a narrative list. It's, bringing the hobby back. It's one of those players where it's like, no, I know what your list is. I've been playing long enough. I'm cool with that. And I'm up for throwing my list against yours because I'm going to discover a lot. I got destroyed. I made it to turn 2. I got just absolutely obliterated. But I knew that going in. If I didn't have that expectation, if I didn't have that awareness as a player, I'm going to be ready to drop kick my army into the trash. So there is this idea of battle value, of points, of mission synergy, where supposedly we're supposed to be equal. And you can have a lot of fun playing that. There's a lot of Battletech that I play that way. I think that's kind of standard. But given the choice, I would prefer to take a playbook from the historical Wargamers. And it's been interesting seeing the shift literally over the years. Admittedly, when I got into historicals, I was I was much, much younger. But even with that and not having that awareness, because I was very competitive, seeing how a lot of these old-timers, literally old-timers then, playing and how they approached wargaming really did influence me. And the difference with forging the narrative versus just going head-to-head, what we see in historical wargaming, Chain of Command, fantastic rule set. And I just need to pause for a moment and say, up to my channel in the Chain of Command playlist, there's a rules overview and some other things analyzing this game. Fantastic for World War II rule sets. Playing Chain of Command, playing historicals, the idea is literally to recreate history, put yourself in the moment as the commander, and see what decisions you make. See the decisions, the different decisions of the battle. So when we play historicals, and this is true for DBA Roman battles and things like that, we try to recreate the battlefield as best we can for that battle. And for World War II, there's pictures, there's maps. Create the terrain, literally. There's a house here, there's a road there. This is where the road forks. This is an apple orchard. Put it out there. Make that happen. What we also see, the sides are not always even at all. Not only with attacker and defender, but it depends on just that moment in history. Playing late war Germans, I play them for the tanks because I love the tanks. Often the Germans are at a tremendous disadvantage because Fortress Europe is being invaded, And the Americans and British have the advantage of material. I'm aware of that because I want to play those Tiger tanks. I want to get those tanks in. But there are historical opportunities if we're forging that narrative where you have some of these super heavy German tanks that at that time in the late war have not been seen yet. So there are mission scenarios where you have a few of these tanks on top of a hill and the Americans are advancing with a bunch of Shermans. And tactically, it's just not fair. It's a shooting gallery. So a chance to explore that. So from that perspective, even playing Warhammer 40K, even playing Battletech, if you gave me a chance or a choice, I would prefer to play the narrative. I would prefer to set something up. Doesn't have to be balanced. Let's see if we can have that glory on the tabletop. One of my fondest 40K games was this. We just had a bunch of terrain. We were going off the cuff. We had a bunch of terrain that was like some Warhammer Fantasy Castle stuff and some other bits and pieces of D&D terrain. We put it together and built like this base in the center of the table. And myself and another player playing Marines, we just set up in the base. And we had like the 4 or 5 Chaos players in the club come at us from each side, each direction. There was no way, especially with 40K, the swinginess of the rule set and the holes there was no way we were going to win. Absolutely impossible. And I'm not saying never say never. No, we weren't going to win. But 40K, the narrative is about those heroic last stands all the time. So it became we're going to play out the game until we have been eliminated to the last. No retreat. No surrender, no mercy. How many turns can we last? We lasted 8 turns, and I wasn't hiding. I mean, we fought to the bitter end. They breached the castle. They're in the courtyard. They're in the towers. I had assault marines in those towers, just 2 or 3 in a room, bolt pistols blazing, holding out to the last, grenades, everything. I mean, it was insane. That was one of the best games that I ever played. But if I look at it from a non-narrative, well, it wasn't fair, you're going to lose. Yeah, but the glory in the Emperor's name, the light that shone in that moment and cast that doubt in the long war, showed those traitors what they were up against. That was worth the price of admission. So given the choice, I would say, always immerse in the narrative. Be willing to say, okay, it doesn't have to be fair, it just has to be fun. But you need that understanding ahead of time. You need the right players who can experiment and be okay with missions that might not be entirely equal, or might be okay with missions that are a little bit what if. Let's experiment. Let's see what happens. But ultimately, what I find in forging the narrative is you can really pull in a lot of models and experiment with a lot of different things and really try to get the most out of your model collection. Wrapping up with Battletech. So I had posted a little while ago, we tend to focus on the mechs. We focus on the tanks. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in Battletech, but there are these non-combat type units that can bring a little something interesting to the game. And they fit in the Battletech universe. And 2 examples that I had posted up to the Battletech playlist, the Mobile HQ, which we kind of mentioned, the coolant truck. The coolant truck is found spraying down, hosing down, hot-running mechs. And tactically on the tabletop, you can hook it up, purge heat. Goes great with an LRM lance. The Mobile HQ, I believe it's in the Total Warfare book, gives you like a +1 initiative, or it plays with the initiative because it represents that superior command and control. For the battle value, it's a little bit fun. Could you take a Mobile HQ or another mech? Well, it's not that expensive. But playing these playing these models in Battletech that are not necessarily offensive. They're supporting units. And not even supporting like in terms of artillery. We're not talking about like a long tom or a thumper, which is support, but it's causing damage. Command and control, recon, support units like that. What are some other units was the question to look at. Well, right away, Karnov. But that has been pushed up to the vlogs. That's been pushed up to the channel. What I would look at next is just the humble helicopter, VTOLs. And it could be something a little bit aggressively oriented like the Warrior, or just taking for the battle value. I mean, I think we're literally talking, I'll let you guys crunch the numbers. I don't have the tech sheet here. But there is a kind of generic helicopter, unarmored helicopter with a machine gun. And it's something like 15 or 21, 23 battle value. It's super fast. It's almost like you don't even print out a tech sheet for it, because if it gets any type of hit other than the rotors, it's done. And it's got a machine gun on it. There's a lot of interesting model ranges out there in the scale for just a helicopter. Then you mount on a little machine gun miniature. You're good to go. You know, you spend like $10 USD, you get 4 of these. They work fantastic for command and control. You're able to spot. You're able to harass. You're able to deal with infantry. You're able to potentially scout things out. You're able to find hidden units and just zip around and have a lot of fun playing these before we even get into the initiative sync and other aspects like that. For the battle value buy-in at any game, even if you're playing like 2K, you know, just barely a lance, a light little skirmish lance, you take 2 of these and you can have a lot of fun zipping around. So after you've looked at the mobile HQ and after you've looked at the coolant truck and possibly maybe some of the different scout vehicles that are out there, I would look at I don't even think it has a name, just that kind of generic unarmored helicopter with a machine gun for that Tactica. Now I'm going to turn it over to you guys in the comments and feedback about what we've been looking at with today's mailbag. And I'm now going to open up questions, comments, thoughts. I'm going to leave this thread open for the week, and then we're going to circle back next Saturday and pull some new questions to kind of push and forge that narrative.